You know his name. He's got a license to act. England already knew him as a man with the golden hair, but that was before the whole world knew his number.
I would give too much away. I can't tell you anything. I'm sorry.
His interpretation of the world's most famous fictional spy brought 007 back to his roots.
What makes him such a special Bond?
He has the toughness, but he has the vulnerability. He's incredibly sexy.
Very human, and as an actor, he's just so strong and intense, you know.
I think Daniel is one of the best James Bond ever.
So, Mr. Bond, shall we discuss your next performance over that drink?
For your eyes only, let's take a close-up on Craig, Daniel Craig.
Daniel Craig was born March 2nd, 1968 in a town called Chester, which is part of Cheshire, England. His mother, Olivia, was an art teacher, and his father, Timothy, was a midshipman in the Merchant Navy.
Young Daniel was raised in Liverpool with his older sister, Leah, born in 1965, before they moved to the Wirral Peninsula and the home of their mother in Hoylake.
Daniel's parents split up when Daniel was 4, but before that happened, they actually ran a pub together called the Ring of Bells, and Daniel would spend a lot of time in the pub as a toddler. And the pub had a TV, and they would always play the old classic comedies like Groucho Marx and Abbott and Costello, Laurel and Hardy, kind of the classics. And well, Daniel, as a toddler, would actually act out the movies that were up on the TV. And he was so good at it that the bar patrons would give him tips. Either that or they were too drunk and they just liked giving the kid money. But either way, you could say that Daniel Craig has been a professional actor, a paid actor, for almost all of his life.
Daniel Rotten Craig seemed to have a taste for acting very early on, starting to act in school plays at the age of 6.
When he was 14 years old, a couple of Daniel's friends put Daniel forward to play a part in the school musical. It was Oliver, and he would be playing the role of the Undertaker. Something shifted when Daniel started performing on the stage. He felt like he finally had something that was his, that he could own. That performance belonged to him. When Daniel was 16, he auditioned to be part of the National Youth Theatre in England, which is a very prestigious organization, and he got in. He spent the next 6 years as part of the company, and he would not just perform, he would do what never needed to be done. He would work with costumes, he would help out in the office, he was like the local handyman, and it really became like a second home to him. Daniel still had to work odd jobs to support himself. He worked a lot in restaurants, both as a waiter and also in the kitchen, and it probably means he's a good tipper today.
Craig performed with NYT on tours to Valencia, Spain, and to Moscow, Russia. He failed at repeated auditions at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama. But after some time, his efforts paid off as he finally entered the prestigious school in 1988. After graduating in 1991, Daniel started to land small roles on TV shows and made his film debut.
Daniel got his first movie in 1991. It was a movie called The Power of One opposite Stephen Dorff. Daniel played a racist South African soldier, and he got paid £18,000 for the role. And to Daniel at that time, it felt like $1 million. And he spent all the money almost as soon as he got it, and nobody told him that he had to pay taxes on it. So when it came time to do his taxes, he was screwed, and he said he actually spent the next 5 years paying down the tax bill for that very first role.
After this role as the ruthless Afrikaner, Craig continued to land minor roles in television and in featured shows like Zorro, The Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, or the Disney movie A Kid in King Arthur's Court, before his first lead part in a BBC serial that attracted the public's attention.
1996 was a big breakthrough year for Daniel because he scored a part in a series called Our Friends in the North. He played kind of this wise guy hustler who ends up being a street vagrant. And it was the first taste of Daniel that the British public really got to see, and they wanted more. In 1998, Daniel played the character of George Dyer, who was the real-life lover of the painter Francis Bacon. The movie was called Love is a Devil, and he spent a lot of the movie naked and covered in paint. The director remarked how fearless he was, because a lot of actors are worried about their image, or what are people going to think of them, or is this too provocative, and what will my agents say? Daniel didn't care about any of that stuff. He just went for it, and it paid off. The movie was a surprise indie hit.
Pursuing on TV and on stage, his movie career started to take off as he began to receive accolades for his appearances in independent movies like The Trench, I Dreamed of Africa, and Elizabeth.
There's a scene in the movie Elizabeth where Daniel's character, who's a kind of deranged priest, is kind of strutting through this church. And Barbara Broccoli, the producer of James Bond, remembers seeing that scene and getting chills all over her body. And she's like, I think that's the next Bond.
It's one of those films that even though this has won an Academy Award, you go, oh my God, Daniel Craig is in this? And he's awesome in this too?
In 2000, Craig co-starred alongside Toni Collette in the dark comedy Hotel Splendide. That same year, he received the British Independent Film Award for Best Actor for his role as a schizophrenic man in Some Voices, continuing his ascension to the top.
1999 gave us the gift that was Lara Croft Tomb Raider, which is a movie that has absolutely no conceivable plot that I could hope to ever explain to you. The only thing we care about from that movie is Daniel Craig walking out of the shower.
After his Tomb Raider sensation, he took another memorable part in Sam Mendes' movie Road to Perdition in 2002.
Daniel Craig had a really solid 2000s. With every single role, you can see him getting more and more attention and better roles. Road to Perdition was the first role for Daniel Craig where we got to see how mean and horrible he can actually be. So in that movie, he plays Connor Rooney, the son of Paul Newman's character, and he is a horrible, awful person. You hate him every second he's on screen, and there's only one person that could properly give him his comeuppance, and that is the world's nicest human, Tom Hanks.
In 2003, he fell in love with a woman twice his age in The Mother with Anne Reid. He then played poet Ted Hughes opposite certified Oscar-winning star Gwyneth Paltrow in the biopic Sylvia, and it showed Craig's increasing range in the roles he picked.
Layer Cake was directed by Matthew Vaughn, and it really continues this Daniel Craig can be a bad guy idea, and so his character doesn't even really have a name and doesn't need one, because all he's doing is selling drugs, knocking people out, being menacing, and he's so good at it, you buy it hook, line, and sinker. And along comes Munich in 2005, directed by the director to end them all, Mr. Steven Spielberg. And even though his role was smaller, he was playing a South African driver, everyone was like, this guy is one to watch.
His charisma and suave and equally looks good under fire performance undoubtedly produced a ping on the Bond radar.
Daniel's journey to becoming James Bond actually began in 2004 at a funeral. A casting director that had been instrumental in his career named Mary Selway had passed away, and her funeral was happening, and he went to it. And also in attendance was Barbara Broccoli, the legendary producer of the James Bond films. And she had had her eye on Daniel for a while, but after she saw him and met him in person at this funeral, the gears really started turning in her head, and she called him in for a meeting soon afterwards.
From the moment we decided we were going to make Casino Royale, obviously the biggest challenge was trying to find an actor who could play James Bond at the beginning of his career as a 00.
When the new Bonds are being cast, they all do the same scene for the screen test. And it's from Russia with Love. It's the scene where Bond comes back to find the Russian agent Tatiana naked in bed.
But at first, Daniel Craig was unsure about taking the role and was aware of the challenges putting on the 007 agent's suits represented.
So this is where they keep the old relics then, eh?
Who doesn't want to play James Bond? It's the role of a lifetime, and it would change his life financially, but he also knew it would really affect his privacy, how he was able to move through the world, so he really went back and forth a bunch of times, but he ended up on this one image of him being an old man sitting in a bar and telling some other patron that he could have been James Bond, but he turned it down. And that image was so upsetting to him that he's like, I don't want that to be the story. I'm gonna say yes.
He was officially unveiled in a press conference and finally succeeded to Sean Connery, George Lazenby, Roger Moore, Timothy Dalton, and Pierce Brosnan as the new James Bond of the Eon Productions film series.
Daniel Craig is so amazing as James Bond that it's easy to forget how controversial his casting was when it was first announced. A lot of people thought he was too short. A lot of people thought he was too blonde. It was a big furor, so he really felt like he had to prove himself. Outraged fans even set up websites like blondnotbond.com or DanielCraigIsNotBond.com. They really didn't see it, but boy, did he prove people wrong.
James Bond is such a beloved, long-standing movie series that all eyes were on this actor because at that time, nobody really knew who he was. He was busy playing a lot of different kinds of roles, and he was mostly eye candy in those. So he shows up in Casino Royale and just blows everybody's mind.
He's got a wonderful presence, and he's very attractive and strong. And he's got, you wouldn't actually want to be on the wrong side of him.
He really did his homework. He dived into all of the Ian Fleming novels that he had written about James Bond, and he discovered there were a lot more levels to the character than we had previously seen in the films, and that sort of explains the depth that we see in that first James Bond movie with Daniel Craig.
We have a love story in this, which I think is fabulous because Eva Green is so fabulous in this movie. We have a stellar cast who are just, I said to Barbara, I said, when we were talking about who should be in the movie, and she's sort of saying, who do you think? And we had little bits of advice going back and forth. I just said, if you cast great people opposite me, that's half my job done.
It's different this time because it's the first Bond. This is where he becomes Bond. He makes up his mind how he's going to live the rest of his life. So in many ways, it's more realistic, it's more human.
Daniel Craig really brought a lot of gravitas to the role, where all of a sudden we start to see this character well-rounded. We see him with all the action that we could ever hope to want, but at the same time, he has relationships with other characters, namely women, and that is not what James Bond is known for at all.
I suppose you've given some thought to the notion that if you lose, your government will have directly financed terrorism.
Bond has been perceived as, always in the same way, these last years, and I think he reinvents Bond, and he's more like an anti-hero, I would say, rather than, the typical, beautiful Bond. There's something boiling underneath, and it's quite sexy.
When you supposed to enter so the others could see you?
Was I? Forgive me.
James Bond has to be sexy, and so in the movie, instead of choosing to objectify the female characters in the film, the filmmakers decided that they were going to have Daniel Craig as James Bond emerge from the water. He was looking on point, he's physically perfect for the role, and even though he's the shortest James Bond on record, no one noticed.
The London premiere of Casino Royale was a huge deal. The Queen of England even showed up.
His stunning, deep, and complex interpretation earned overwhelming critical acclaim, and Craig received a BAFTA nomination for Best Actor, the first time a Bond actor had received such a major nomination for his performance as James Bond. Following the success of Casino Royale, Craig followed that up with movies that received limited success, like The Invasion, released in 2007.
Oh, be psychotic. I mean, come on.
He rejoined Kidman and his James Bond girl Eva Green in The Golden Compass, an adaptation of the best-selling fantasy novel by Philip Pullman, which didn't convince either.
I want to see the icebergs and glaciers and learn about dust and everything.
What do you know about dust?
It was time for Craig to return as 007 in Quantum of Solace in 2008.
We've done 2 months in Central America. We've been down to Chile. We've spent quite a lot of time in Italy now. And here we are in Austria, which is, this is amazing.
2011 was a very productive year for Craig, as he diversified his game. He put on the hat of a cowboy in the Western sci-fi mashup, Cowboys and Aliens, directed by Jon Favreau.
Close.
Daniel Craig is so secure in his abilities and his filmography that, not every film has to be a gigantic hit or even make sense. Cowboys and Aliens is a great example of that.
It's a huge challenge, I assume, to be an English actor and play a cowboy, the most American of all things.
Let everybody else do the talking and I do the action. So really that's where I base my character, sort of very much on the silent sort of Clint Eastwood, sort of the man with no name.
Even though most people would say that Daniel Craig is definitely the focal point of every film, I don't think he necessarily feels that way. Because when he stars in movies like The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, his character is not the title of the film, and he fades into the background when it's appropriate. So this is a guy who definitely seems like he chooses roles based on the merit of the role, not the fact that it's the first name on the marquee.
Adventure seemed to suit him as Craig worked again with Steven Spielberg in the CGI adaptation of The Adventures of Tintin. in which he had the dual role of the villain, Mr. Sakharine, and his ancestor, the pirate Red Rackham. 2011 was also the year he played in the psychological thriller Dream House, alongside none other than his wife.
In 1992, Daniel married an actress named Fiona Loudon, and they had a daughter together named Ella. The marriage wasn't built to last, though. They split up 2 years later in 1994. Daniel Craig and Rachel Weisz became romantically involved in 2010 after they worked together in the film Dream House. But they've actually known each other for a lot longer than that. They became friends during their university days in the early 90s. The timing for Daniel and Rachel to get together was actually perfect because she was just coming off a 9-year relationship with the director Darren Aronofsky. And Daniel had recently split from his longtime girlfriend, Suzuki Mitchell. So the timing was perfect for them to get together, and when they did, the sparks flew. When Daniel and Rachel decided to tie the knot, they did it super on the down low, like nobody knew about this. There were only 4 guests in attendance, and 2 of them were their children, Henry and Ella. I don't know who the other 2 were, but I like to imagine that one of them was Judi Dench.
You get to be a huge figure of authority, and you get to boss him about, and there is a very special relationship, I think, between Bond and M.
Skyfall in 2012 was an anomaly that the James Bond series hadn't seen up to that point. It's by far the most emotional Bond movie, and instead of focusing on a lot of crazy action, it focuses on the sense of loss that character feels and the sense of concern. You've got M, played by Judi Dench, who's retiring. We've got everybody doing their James Bond trying to kill him thing, but he's really conflicted about so many things going on in his life.
The screenplay by John Logan I thought was excellent and better than any. As I read it and imagined the film, it seemed to be of a caliber or complexity that I don't think I've seen in a Bond film before quite.
I think that dialogue all the time between playing on the iconography, on the tradition of Bond, and allowing it to breathe and live and have the fun and the elements that a traditional Bond movie has, and at the same time making it yours, specifically yours.
And there's car chases. So it works on every single level, and Skyfall is one of the highest grossing Bond movies to date for that reason. When Daniel Craig was filming James Bond, we also saw how committed he was to the role, because he insists on doing an awful lot of his own stunts, and he just continues to hurt himself. So in Casino Royale, he actually lost 2 of his front teeth. He had to go get them replaced, but that just sort of put him as the Bond willing to really commit to the role, because I don't think that there's any other actor that played Bond that got hurt as many times as Daniel Craig, so that either means that Daniel Craig is super committed or he's super clumsy, or both.
There's some physicality in it that you have to be prepared to do. Of course, mine compared to Daniel's is nothing. I mean, every time I saw him doing these stunts or these action scenes, I was really impressed by how easy he does it and how demanding they are. I mean, it's a lot of work.
You know, we've always relied on the fact that we do things for real in Bond movies, and that's just the way it is.
One of the most iconic Bond women ever has to be Queen Elizabeth herself. She filmed a scene with Daniel Craig for the opening of the London Olympics. It was a little skit. Danny Boyle, the director, had the idea to do it, and he went to Daniel Craig and said, "Hey, will you do this with the Queen?" And Daniel said, "I guess so." And Danny was like, "Good," because she already said yes, so you're doing it. And they spent a few hours together shooting it. There were some corgis running around. They jump in a helicopter. It ended up being an amazing and unforgettable moment. And Daniel said it was quite surreal and something he will never forget.
By the time that they got around to shooting Spectre, the entire world wanted to know every single detail about every single Bond movie, because Daniel Craig was so good that everyone wanted just a piece of Bond.
Bond is a very prominent element in our culture. I really do not use that word, but in this instance it is, to say the least, justified. Iconic element of our Western culture.
There has been, and I hate to use the word, an arc through all four films. He's got older, he's got a bit, wiser, he's got a bit, and that for me is a great pleasure to explore that.
Well, it's a pleasure to finally meet you, 007. I've heard a lot about you. Most of it good.
One of my favorite Daniel Craig anecdotes is that he appears in a cameo role in Star Wars The Force Awakens. He's just a huge fan of the franchise, so he agreed to be in a stormtrooper suit. You don't even see his face. He just did it because he wanted to be in a Star Wars movie.
After 4 box office hits as James Bond, Daniel Craig made a surprising turn to a more independent cinema in 2017. Daniel plays a hammy safecracker in Steven Soderbergh's heist comedy film Logan Lucky. The same year, he teamed up with the ex-Bond girl Halle Berry to go through the Los Angeles riots in Kings. And in 2019, with his final participation in a James Bond film coming closer, Daniel took the part of a new iconic character.
For the movie Knives Out, Daniel went totally against type playing this detective, and it was a gamble that paid off.
It's a take. It's sort of not so much a fresh take on a whodunit, but it's sort of modernized and given an edge.
It surprised everybody because it was directed by Rian Johnson, who wasn't known for ever directing ensemble pieces along those lines. He'd done a Star Wars movie, he'd done some sci-fi movies, he's a total nerd, and all of a sudden, here comes Knives Out, where Daniel Craig is playing Benoit Blanc.
I was kind of astounded by the cast we were able to get. It all started with Daniel Craig. He was the first one to sign on, and he had a little window before he had to go into the next James Bond movie. And so once he was in it, we suddenly had a start date, and then all these great actors just started pouring in. It was kind of overwhelming.
As to that, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to gently request that you all stay in town until the investigation is complete. It shouldn't be more than 2 days.
Knives Out was such a smashing success at over $300 million at box office that they made a sequel to it.
Daniel also said that movie couldn't have come at a better time because Bond was coming to an end and he needed audiences to go with him somewhere new. And with Knives Out, they certainly did. With No Time to Die, Daniel felt like he really left the James Bond franchise the way he wanted to leave it. If his run had ended after Spectre, he said he would have always felt a little unfulfilled, like he didn't quite put that period on the end of the sentence. But with this one, he nailed it.
And we felt like there was a story to finish off and to wrap up and to bring Leia's story through, but also everybody else's character to sort of tie up a lot of loose ends.
He works in a little bit of a theatrical way. I'm from a theatre background. We both are, actually. So to see how he prepares, to see just how much detail goes into these scenes, just how much detail goes into Bond. I've firsthand witnessed how he's come up with the Bond that he's come up with. It makes complete sense.
No matter how successful Daniel becomes in movies, he always goes back to his first love, which is the stage. In 2022, he starred on Broadway in a production of Macbeth, and he actually came down with COVID during the run of the show and had to miss several performances. But as soon as he was cleared to go, he was back on that stage because there's really no place else he'd rather be. 2 days before the premiere of No Time to Die, Daniel received another great honor. He got a star on the legendary Hollywood Walk of Fame. And here's a fun fact. The address of the star is 7007 Hollywood Boulevard. So, they even got 007 into the address. In 2015, the United Nations appointed Daniel the first global advocate for the elimination of mines and explosive hazards. And in 2021, he was made an honorary commander in the Royal Navy. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but I bet he looks great in the uniform.
In addition to his military grade, Daniel Craig will keep a bond with Bond forever, as he shares with the fictional spy the honor of being a companion of the Order of St. Michael and St. George for services to film and theater.
The James Bond films didn't just make Daniel Craig an action star, they made him a fashion icon. He always looked incredible in the movies, often in clothes designed by Tom Ford, and on the red carpet, he always turned heads. For the London premiere of No Time to Die, Daniel wore this beautiful crushed velvet pink suit. It was fabulous.
Daniel Craig's movies have grossed over $3 billion worldwide, with a B. And that's mostly thanks to the James Bond franchise, but it's also because his movies are directed by incredible directors. They have great casts and really good scripts. He just picks things really well, and then he plays them so perfectly that they make tons of cash.
What makes him such a special Bond? He's just everything that you could want, isn't he? He's sort of magnetic and dangerous and unpredictable and wicked and funny and everything.
I think personally something that makes him stand out more and makes the character more special is how funny Daniel is. And he has this sense of humor and this charisma that makes him create a character that's very relatable and real.
His days as 007 may be over, but be sure that no matter what, Daniel Craig will return.
It's a massive collaborative effort, creative collaborative effort there's nothing else like it in the movie business. Barbara Broccoli runs a family business. We're all a member of that family. We look out for each other, and I will miss that the most.